Well, you think about it from the physician perspective, the referral process is also a nightmare. I may think I'm getting information to the specialist. I may call them on the phone to tell them about the patient I'm sending. And I may then talk to their front desk and say, oh, by the way, you should expect a call from so-and-so. And the patient will come back and tell you when they went to that appointment, they went into the exam room, and guess what they said? They said, hello, Mrs. Jones, how are you? And can you tell me why you're here? And Mrs. Jones will respond by saying, I don't know why I'm here. Dr. Kronlund told me to come and see you. I mean, that happens over and over again. I've heard that from so many specialty practices that they feel really unempowered to see that patient. Because again, even though I may, as a primary care doctor, have sent tons of information, or thought I did, or maybe even photocopied it and stuck it in an envelope and given it to the patient, say, here, you give this to the doctor when you go. It's amazing how often, by the time that patient arrives, nobody's really clear why that patient is there, and often the patient isn't either. The nice thing about using Clarity is you have guaranteed attachment of that clinical information and the ability for the recipients and the senders to see it, in real time. And that really changed a lot of behavior. For example, when we first launched Clarity, only about 15% of the time was there any clinical information electronically attached to that referral. And the reason that was the case, the referral coordinators told us why that was the case. Because they knew, in the status quo world, that they're going to be called 3 and 4 times for the same information, so I might as well wait until they call me back. No one really believed that information was going to arrive on the other end. Now we have a guaranteed way of doing that, and we now have well over 90% of the time that a referral is sent, there's an appropriate clinical information attached to it. One of the things we wanted to do when we first launched Clarity was to be able to get to the point where we could begin to measure, the commitment amongst physicians within a community. And when we first started doing this, you would expect that the performance of the community wasn't all that great. Primary care practices were not putting a lot of records, delivering a lot of records, and the receivers were off and on about scheduling the appointments and whatnot. But when we started putting that together into a performance report, and when it shared it to the practices, it made a huge difference, because we actually had to face each other across the room and say, we're going to make some better commitments. One meeting, we were all sitting in the room, and we had the practice managers and their lead physicians in the room, and we laid down one of these performance reports. And before it hit the table, the physician and the practice manager from one of the specialty practices said, "What's this 35% right here?" referring to the clinical attachment rate. And of course, the first thing, like all good physicians, is you question the data, right? The data must be wrong. And it was interesting because one of the recipients of referrals from that practice, the physician leaned over the table and said, well, so-and-so, the biggest problem my practice has with yours is you never sent us any clinical information. Within 5 days, the first clinic's performance went to 90%. Because there's nothing quite like that peer pressure and having made commitments to each other about how we're going to behave as an integrated community. We are back in relationship with each other in a way that we've never been for many, many years.